Welcome back to Have You Met Ottawa here at Algonquin College. On today's episode, we're learning about the forgotten history of the Shiners, the Irish gangs of old that once ran this city. After that, we'll talk to the average citizen about how much they know about their city. Ottawa is often seen as the city that fun forgot, the city whose only defining characteristic is not being Toronto. We're talking to him to try and figure out just why people think this. This will be followed by learning about Ottawa's Indigenous walks and how you can learn more about Ottawa's First Nations and colonial past. But to kick things off, here's Vincent Sabran with a look at Ottawa's dangerous past of the Shiners. Vincent, take us away, please.
If I told you a turf war happened here in this exact location in the Byward Market, would you believe me? Well, believe it or not, Bytown, as Ottawa was called at the time, actually was a very dangerous place to live in the 19th century. And this is exactly where the Shiner Wars took place. Now, the combination of French, Irish, Scottish, and English settlers in the area was a combustible mixture, especially combined with a history of historical grievances, religious differences, poverty, and a wee bit of alcohol. Now, brawls were very commonplace in the area, especially when lumbermen and raftsmen were in the area to collect supplies for the season. Now, things could get particularly heated up between the French and the Irish, and things only got worse when the Rideau Canal finished being built in 1832. Now, after the completion of the canal, the Irish workers couldn't find any jobs because the lumber industry was controlled for the most part by French Canadians. And those unemployed banded together and committed acts of malice, of terror, to try and find jobs by force. These people were called the Shiners, and they were led by lumber baron Peter Allen, who was known for hiring only Irish laborers. The Shiner Wars took place between 1837 and 1845 and consisted of acts of terror by the Shiners. They went on a ruthless crusade to scare the French Canadians out of Bytown. Now, they were awful people, beating people senselessly in the streets, poisoning wells, hitting women in the streets. One story goes that they actually once ruined a funeral procession, threw the coffin out of the wagon, and dragged the body through the streets. But back then, everyone was too afraid to do anything about the Shiners. But the French had a champion of their own, Joseph Montferrand. Now, you may be more familiar with his contemporary version, Big Joe Muffera, the mascot of the Ottawa Redblacks, but trust me, Joe Montferrand was a real person living in Bytown at the time. One story tells of 150 Shiners ambushing Big Joe on the Union Bridge. Legend has it that Montferrand grabbed the nearest man, took him by the ankles, and swung him like a club, knocking the others to the ground. He threw all 150 men off the bridge and into the river. Now, the magistrates of Upper Town largely ignored Shiner violence until it started to affect them. In 1837, Peter Allen led his gang of Shiners to a city council meeting and essentially tried to take over the town by trying to force the people to elect all Shiners to city council. Now, this meeting ended in a riot, and this was the beginning of the end for the Shiners. By 1845, Peter Allen had fled Ottawa, and the influence of his Irish gang was gone. The full history of the Shiner Wars is worth looking into if you're interested in Ottawa's history. It actually reads like a real-life take on Gangs of New York, the Martin Scorsese movie. Take it away, Josh.
Thank you, Vince. You know, I always find it so fascinating to learn about Ottawa's history, because a lot of people not living in the city often feel like Toronto is much more deserving to be the nation's capital. In fact, the top 3 Google searches when looking up why is Ottawa are as follows. Why is Ottawa Canada's capital? Why is Ottawa so boring? And why is Ottawa so cold? But I think the more important question is, do you know why it's the capital? We're going to be asking an actual citizen of Ottawa here if they know the history of their own city and what makes it so special. You ready, Jordy?
Yep.
57. What British monarch recommended Ottawa to become the nation's capital because of its defensive positioning and its location in the center of Canada at the time? Was it A, Queen Elizabeth I, B, Queen Mary I, C, King George IV, or D, Queen Victoria?
Okay, Queen Elizabeth.
I'm afraid the correct answer was D, Queen Victoria.
Oh, okay.
Upon its founding, what was Ottawa's original name? Was it A, Nepean, B, Bytown, C, Stitchville, or D, Bellington?
Bytown.
That is correct, Bytown. Okay. Which is what the Byward Market gets its name after.
Okay.
Speaking of Bytown, its original name was Bytown as for what reason? Was it because A, the location was near the town of Gatineau, hence right by that town? Was it because B, it was nicknamed for having the Rideau Canal, being a town that ships would often pass by without stopping? C, was it named after a specific type of timber that lumberjacks knew as buyer's wood? Or D, was it named after British Colonel John By?
I see because of the Rideau Canal.
I'm afraid the correct answer was D. It was named after Colonel John Bai.
Okay.
He was the original founders of Bytown, I believe.
Okay.
Question 4, and our final question. Ottawa gets its name from the Odawa people, who in turn get their name from the Algonquin Huron word for Adawa, meaning what? A, to trade, B, to scout, C, to hunt, or D, to feast?
To feast.
I'm afraid the correct answer was A, to trade.
Oh, okay.
So how much do you really think you know about Ottawa after all this?
Well, I just learned something new today, so I guess it's still little. So.
Do you think it should be the nation's capital after all this?
Well, I guess we should be known for something, other than being soft, so that's a good thing. Thank you for having me. I learned a lot today.
And on that note, I think it's high time we talk more about some First Nations history before we go. It'd be impossible to tell the story of Ottawa's history without also speaking about the peoples who once lived here. Our college itself takes its name after the Algonquin peoples, believed to be some of the first in North America to develop agrarian agriculture, in fact. As Canadians, our strength is in our diversity, and what better way to demonstrate that by taking part in, or supporting, Ottawa's local Indigenous walks. These Indigenous-led walking tours of Ottawa highlight many overlooked commemorative areas and art installations that tie into the colonial and First Nations history of Ottawa and Canada itself as a whole. Anyone interested in this side of history should contact Jamie Morse at Indigenous Walks to gain a better perspective. Morse is Métis from Buffalo Lake Métis Settlement in Alberta, but has called Ottawa home for 20 years. To encourage you all to take this tour, here's a very brief overview of a few spots which are highlighted. One of the first things you'll see is a remembrance piece in front of City Hall by Dean Ottawa from Kirikan Zibi, which is intended to commemorate the unceded land of the Algonquin people, in whose territory we all live. Interestingly enough, this plaque was unveiled in 2017, the same year that Canada celebrated its 150th anniversary. With that in mind, just a few weeks after it was unveiled, the City of Ottawa unveiled a new monument right next to it to celebrate this anniversary. This huge cement structure was seen by many as an ill-timed revelation as it overshadowed the Indigenous stone, and it came off sort of as a colonial reminder of the oppression that Indigenous people suffered, and still suffer to this day. What is even more emblematic of the suffering is the Lost Child, a haunting sculpture by artist David Robert Pictican that resembles a fragmented Inukshuk, an Inuit structure with a human-like form that is meant to be a guiding post. It was inspired by memory he had from his youth, visiting Edmonton for the first time, and being completely overwhelmed by skyscrapers. The fact that it's fragmented and not whole speaks to his Indigenous experiences of feeling lost in an urban setting. Ironically, this piece has also been squashed amongst the buildings that make up City Hall, and is not frequently admired by pedestrians. If you'd like to learn more, we strongly encourage you to contact Jamie Morse at Indigenous Walks to buy more tickets for her tour. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank Jordy for participating in our quiz, and I'd like to thank all of you, of course, for tuning in. I hope you all learned a little bit more about Ottawa today. We'll see you next time on Have You Met Ottawa? I've been Josh McKay for my colleague Vincent Sabaran. Goodbye and good luck.